do you think I should get started? We can get started. And if Alfred could watch for people, admitting people, or Dara, then I'll just get started to honor everybody's time. Even though sometimes it does seem to take people a while to drift in. And I see that it's now streaming to Facebook. So thank you, Alfred. Okay, all right. I'll get started then. I am Judge Laura Mack. I'm a retired district court judge from the 29th District Court. Most of you know that. Although I don't feel so retired right now since I've been filling in at various courts and sitting in Third Circuit one day a week. That has finally come to an end. I have taken over the reins as president of our chapter as of January 1st, somewhat reluctantly. Our fearless leader and our founder, Lauren Rousseau, and she's here still with us, obviously, but her work duties increased this semester, and she was feeling a bit overwhelmed, and I agreed to step in reluctantly, as I said, because I think Lauren and Dara have just done such a phenomenal job in starting our chapter and growing it and doing all the fantastic things that they do. I don't feel that I can really step in her shoes. So I'm very honored to have been asked, and I will do the best I can, but please bear with me and realize that Lauren is still here and she's still available, and she still monitors she gets the emails and all that. So she is going to help, and she is acting as our secretary. I was the secretary, so we kind of have switched positions. And I just want to say that I'm very grateful to the board. We have a phenomenal board, and I'm very happy to serve with these people. They are extremely dedicated and professional, and I couldn't be more thrilled with the group of people that we have. So thank you so much to Samantha, to Tanya, to Kelly, our treasurer, Alfred, Victoria, who's here. And if there's somebody here that I didn't see, I just appreciate all of you very much. So thank you for staying with us and bearing with us. It's been a rough year, obviously. We're in our second year of COVID, going almost into our third. We decided to go with Zoom after going back in person for September, October, November, December. And that was a tough decision. And we've struggled to keep our audience coming to the live meetings. And we did make the decision to go Zoom at least for the next 3 months. So January, February, and March are scheduled to be via Zoom. And you'll be getting that information once I start the PowerPoint. So we'll get started with the PowerPoint. I took Lauren's PowerPoint and modified it somewhat. So let's see if I can get it going properly. Does everybody see that? Did I share my screen properly? Are you there?
We are not seeing it.
Okay,
Oh,
hold on.
not seeing it.
And my mouse is, okay, here we go. All right, I didn't hit the share screen. That's what I didn't do. Okay. Okay.
Now we see it.
All
Yes.
right.
Now we see.
Okay. All right. There we go. All right. So I did announce already that our next couple of forums will be via Zoom through at least March. We'll reevaluate early March to decide whether or not to continue on Zoom or to go back in person at the summit. I do want to give a shout out to our Stronger Together family and friends support group. It's just going phenomenally. It's a fabulous resource that we have, and I really thank Kelly and Jackie Sanders and everybody who supports that group. I think it's really one of the best things that we have going for us. It's really helpful to people. And it's the second and fourth Thursday of every month. It's still going to remain on Zoom. It's been very successful, and a lot of people from all over Michigan and even other states are attending now. So we're going to keep the same format going forward. We did decide to discontinue our grief support group just because we were having difficulty getting people to come in person and even online. So we partnered with an organization in Northville called New Hope Center for Grief Support. And they have a variety of grief support resources for people who are suffering with grief, all different kinds. There's youth, there's parents losing a child, there's widowers and widows. I do have a flyer that I'll show in just a moment with some of their groups, but the best way to see is to really go to their website. If you search for New Hope Center for Grief Support, it will come right up, and they have a ton of resources for people. So here's the flyer for the Stronger Together group. It's got the new meeting dates. If you go to our website, you should be able to see this flyer to give you the dates and times and how to sign on. It's got the meeting ID and the password there also. And this will be part of what is on our, I think on our YouTube channel once we conclude this forum. And so I tried to show you some of the programs that New Hope Grief Support Center has. So they just have a ton of things. They are going to be starting, see, they have a loss due to substance use. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if I can make it bigger. Sorry. But let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. There is one loss due to substance use. So if you go to their website, you can see more. It just seems like a really well-run organization with a ton of support. Here's the second page to that. They have Family Fridays, Teen Support Group, Young Adult Group. So again, we're really happy to partner with them to provide this really needed resource for the people in our area. So our mission is to provide education, resources, support to families and individuals impacted by addiction. One of the things that we're proud of is launching Hope Not Handcuffs in 2 police departments last year, the City of Wayne Police Department and Garden City. We do desperately need angels. Angels are needed throughout the region, especially downriver and in Wayne County in general. So please, if you know of anybody who'd be interested, if you yourself are interested, please go on the website and find a training. There are trainings happening all the time. I think some of them are virtual, so it's not terribly difficult to find a training. I did the training, although I haven't actually helped someone yet, but Susan Rowe, who's on this call, has been just a fabulous angel. She has helped dozens of people get into treatment, and she can tell you herself how rewarding it is when you are able to connect someone with effective treatment. So also just please watch our Facebook page or the website for more information. Our Facebook page is probably a little bit more up to date and current than our website, but either place you can find more information. And I thought I'd put this in here. We talked a little bit about goals for our year at our planning session in December. And so here's what we came up with. We want to continue to provide excellent monthly forums, support the Stronger Together and other programs to benefit the fan community. We need feedback, though. We do need your participation. We need your ideas to make our chapter the best it can be. So we'd like to know what you want to see as far as forums, special groups, and we're open to any suggestions that you have. We do want to expand Hope Not Handcuffs to more police departments in the Northwest Wayne area, and we are going to work on that with help from Fan Central. Pat Stropes is now employed by Fan, and he's very familiar with this area and all the contacts, and we're hoping he can help us in that regard. There are a lot of changes at Fan Central too, and these changes I think are for the better. So we're really hoping that this is going to be a great year. We want to continue providing our sober living scholarships. We started that shortly after the pandemic started in March of 2020. And we had a fundraiser last year that provided money to help keep that program going. So it's still continuing for sober living houses in the area of Northwest Wayne. We want to continue doing that and expand if possible. And we do want to try to start a comeback quick response team. This has been started by Fan Central in Macomb County, and it's just a phenomenal program. What it is a post-overdose wellness check with a police officer, peer recovery coach, and family recovery coach. They reach out to people who have been discharged from a hospital after an overdose. And I think that's the time when you really have to get someone and pair them up with a peer support person. It's been proven to work, and we're hoping to start that in our area. And the last goal we have is to start a harmless program, like has been recently started in Macomb County. And this is basically a harm reduction program. Things like clean needles, safe injection sites, information about how to become clean and sober, how to get on the road to recovery. And you build trust with people who are in active addiction to help them hopefully, make up their own mind that they need help and reach out. So those are our goals. They're pretty lofty, but I think we can achieve them with your help. So our speakers today, myself, Tanya Napolitano, Samantha Carducci, and Elise Dubois. And Lauren is going to make the introductions. So I'm not going to talk about each of us. We're going to share our personal stories of addiction, recovery, and loss. And to just sum up, we're always here for you. This is why we exist. So please reach out. Somebody will get back to you immediately. Our next public forum is on February 7th at 6:30 via Zoom. And it is going to be our very own Jackie Sanders about enabling. So I think enabling is probably the most important subject to the family members of someone suffering from the disease of substance use disorder. It's a huge topic, a very difficult topic, and Jackie Sanders is an expert at this. And she is going to lead the discussion on enabling, what it is, why we do it, and how to stop. So please plan to be present for the next public forum. In March, we have a phenomenal person. His name is Bill Castro, and he is with the Michigan High Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas. This is an agency funded by the federal government that works with the Department of Drug Enforcement and the FBI and local police departments. So he is going to partner with a local police officer and talk about the current trends in drug trafficking, what drugs are circulating, what the issues are, where the overdose deaths are. They have all of that information. So that will be a really interesting forum. So as I said before, keep an eye on our Facebook page for more information. Lauren posts things constantly to that, fascinating articles and information about addiction and recovery. You can watch recordings of our past forums and other events on our YouTube channel. Northwest Wayne Fan is what it's called if you search for it. Here's the flyer for the next forum, enabling. Oh, yes, the last thing, I almost forgot. This is a really interesting program. This is, we received this information from Mario, who's the president of the Washtenaw Fan Chapter. And he is always doing really innovative things with his chapter. So they received a grant to provide $500 to each work of art chosen to be featured in an art show they are hosting at the Michigan Theater in Ann Arbor on February 22nd, 2/22/22. It's kind of interesting. They have a whole program that day, but it's really fascinating. Anybody connected with addiction who has been affected by addiction is eligible to submit their art to consider it for inclusion. It's called the Call to Art. And you have a deadline for when you have to submit your art. And I'm going to show you the flyer. Submission deadline is Tuesday, January 25th. Eligibility open to local artists of all skill levels who have been affected by substance use disorders. And each artist selected to participate will receive a commission of $500. So there is a website listed here. It's kind of small, but again, this will be on the YouTube channel, and I think we may post it to our Facebook page as well. I will certainly try to do that, or I can ask Lauren to do that. So it's very innovative, very cool. I know in the treatment court that I started at the 29th District Court, I was really surprised by the artistic ability of a lot of our participants. Art is really a way to express yourself, to bring out grief, hope. It was, our art programs were really valued by our participants. So I think this is just a wonderful program. Okay, that is the end of the PowerPoint. Now I have to stop sharing.
Hey, Judge Mack.
Yes.
How about if you're going to have me introduce the speakers, right?
Yes,
Do you
please.
maybe want to go back to the PowerPoint slide that had everyone's picture on it, and then I can kind of give a little explanation about each of those individuals before we start?
I can surely do that.
And regarding the flyer for the art thing, I saw that actually on Facebook on the Washtenaw fans site, a little something about that, but I didn't know about this, you know, giving grants to people who submit art. Please do send me that flyer and I'll post it on our Facebook page. So,
all right.
And thank you so much for your kind comments. And you're so self-deprecating. You will be an amazing president. And I think we all can see that just from this little bit, even this little bit of an introduction. So we are very, very grateful that you've taken the reins, taken the helm, and allowed me to step back a little bit, but I'm still on the board and still engaged. So yeah, you'll be great. And we are very grateful for you. So Judge Mack said a little bit about her background, but I think that you all deserve to know a little bit more of how accomplished she is. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her as well as the other speakers. And so I'm going to start with Judge Mack because she's going to be our first speaker, telling her personal story of why she is engaged with our chapter and does the work that she does. So as she mentioned, she is the recently retired judge of the 29th District Court in Wayne. I don't know if she mentioned, though, that she held the role of chief judge during that entire period, and she held that position for 16 years. She also was the president just last year of the Rotary Club of Wayne. So she basically finished out her term in that role, and we nabbed her to immediately step into the role of president of our chapter. She is a director for the Michigan Association of Treatment Court Professionals. She serves on the State Court Administrative Office Mental Health Advisory Committee. She serves on the Governor's Mental Health Governor's Mental Health Diversion Council Incompetent to Stand Trial Workshop, or work group rather, and on the Wayne County Jail Diversion Committee. And then, as she's indicated, although she says she's retired, she continues to serve as a judge in several different capacities. So she is amazingly busy and amazingly accomplished, and we are so grateful to have her on our chapter as president of our chapter and speaking today. So the speaker after Judge Mack will be Elise Dubois. You see her in the green dress and the pearls and the picture there on the PowerPoint slide. She's been an active member of the Northwest Wayne Fan Board of Directors for quite a while, and then just in January, she left the chapter board to join our advisory board. She's a licensed professional counselor who's part of a group practice that specializes in trauma. She also has her own private practice where she sees clients who struggle with anxiety, substance use disorder, and perfectionism. She's worked in the mental health and treatment field for more than 10 years, and she is a person who's in long-term recovery. Our third speaker will be Tanya Napolitano. She is the beautiful blonde next to Judge Mack on the top line of our photographs there. She is a director for the of the Northwest Wayne Fan Board of Directors and has been for some time. She's also the operations manager for a company called Core Title LLC. She led the Northwest Wayne Fan Grief Support Group for several years. She's trained as a Hope Not Handcuffs angel, and she's part of a local jail and prison ministry. And then lastly, we have Samantha Carducci. She is also a director on our board. She is a master's level social worker and a graduate of Eastern Michigan University. She is a proud member of the National Association of Social Workers, the Michigan chapter. She began her clinical career providing psychotherapy for geriatric clients with severe and persistent mental illness in older adult services programs at the Neighborhood Service Organization. And she currently provides mental health services to inmates at Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility in the Michigan Department of Corrections. So with that, that gives you a little bit of information about each of our speakers. We can ditch the slides and and I'll turn it back over to Judge Mack. Oh, one more thing. After each speaker, we'll give a little bit of time for questions, for just probably a few questions, and then we're going to stop because we're going to kind of try to keep on a reasonable pace. Each speaker is going to do about 15 minutes or so of speaking, and then we'll open it up for more questions at the conclusion after everyone has spoken. So Judge Mack, take it away.
Thank you, Lauren, for that wonderful introduction. My story is difficult to talk about, and I don't talk about it very often, but I have found over the years that the personal stories are the most powerful. They reach people, they touch people in a way that other things just don't. So I'm going to tell you my story. It started when I met my husband, my first husband, Bob. I was 17 years old. I was just a kid. I married him at 19, even though he didn't want to get married. And I didn't realize that at the time. I was madly in love with him and I wanted him. And so I ignored the warning signs and married him. I thought I could fix him. You know, it's a common problem we women have. I saw the problems. I saw that he had problems with intimacy. He had addictions at the time, but they were not addictions to drugs. He was addicted to pornography and some other things. And I realized now it's part of a pattern of addicted behavior. He also had a different value system than I did. And I converted my own values to match his, which of course wasn't the right thing for me to do. Our marriage was rocky, and we would have gotten divorced in any event, I'm sure. But in 1983, he started using cocaine. A friend of his, you can think back to the 80s, cocaine was rampant. Stars were using it, athletes were using it. I guess people are using it again, but it was really popular. And the dangers weren't really all that well known at the time. Nobody really thought it was addictive. My husband's friends started selling it. He had sold marijuana for years, and he started selling cocaine because it was more lucrative. So he tried it. We tried it. He liked it in a way that he couldn't stop using. And it was in 1983. It was an awful year, you know, just a really horrible year of watching him cycle further and further into addiction, trying to stop, not being able to stop, not wanting to get help, thinking he didn't have a problem. I could see he had a problem. I had a 6-year-old child. He's the father. And what made me leave him was worried about my child. There were drug dealers coming to the house. He was a good provider. He did not fit the mold at all. He was hardworking, industrious, good at his job. We had a nice life. And in fact, I'm going to show you some pictures before I go on. I did a small PowerPoint because he really was, oops, sorry, I did not do that correctly. Hold on. I didn't hit share screen first. There we go. Okay. Can you see that?
We can see it.
Okay. I want to start with the first slide. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is us when we got married. He would have been 73 this year. But he died in 1989. He was killed by a drug dealer after I divorced him. This was us on our wedding day. As I said, he was a lively person. He was an interesting person. He was an extrovert, extreme extrovert. I'm an introvert, so I was drawn to that. He restored old jukeboxes, and this is our son, Doug. He was a wonderful father. He was absolutely loved being a dad more than anything on earth, although it wasn't enough to save him. I remember telling him that if you loved our son, you would find a way to quit. Of course, not knowing, of course, how he couldn't. He just couldn't. But I pulled out these old pictures, brought back a lot of old memories. This was in 1983, shortly before I left him. We went on a trip to Canada for a wedding, and he smuggled cocaine across the border. I didn't know it. But I found that picture and I thought that kind of, yeah. We reconciled. We divorced in 84 and I moved out. I let him keep our home on the lake because he had threatened to take our son to Mexico. He had mob connections. So I let him keep the house. I moved into an apartment, started working as a paralegal for a law firm. And we shared, I kept custody of our son, but he saw him on weekends because somehow I thought that I was the problem and that if I was gone, he wouldn't use. I learned pretty quickly that that wasn't true, but I couldn't bear to keep our son from him, so I let him have visitation. It was a rough few years. I decided to go back with him. He promised he was clean and that I thought I could help him this time. I thought that I was strong enough and I could keep him from using. So I came back in we divorced in 84. I went back in 86 and spent almost a year back at the house on the lake. Doug was going to school at the elementary school right across the street. And we had a good life. I continued to work and save my money. And what happened was he was good at first. He couldn't stay away from the drugs, though. He was starting to sneak them into the house. I flushed some down the toilet when I found he was high. But it happened again. He got violent this time. He had never crossed that line before, but he was coming down from the cocaine and he got violent with me. And I ended up pressing charges. I didn't want to. My friends insisted. When I told them what had happened, they said, you have to press charges. You absolutely have to. And it was a horrible experience, but one that changed me forever. He ended up being placed on probation and was drug tested for a year, and he stopped using. He actually told me that I saved his life by doing that, by pressing charges and holding him accountable. And his statement to me that I saved his life echoed in my head almost every day as a district judge. When placing people on probation and have substance use disorder problems, I was aware that I was saving their lives, that I could be saving their lives. My ex-husband, Bob, was afraid of going to jail. He was not the type that would do well in jail. And he was terrified of going to jail, and that kept him from using. He got clean. But when he got off probation, he hooked up with someone that he had used with in the past and got right back into it. It was that person that killed him months later, after he'd gotten clean again. By the way, he had gotten completely clean and had started seeing Doug again, started paying his child support and all that again. But he owed this person money, and they called, and my son was there for a visit. He couldn't see him for a while he was using. He stopped using. He was clean. Doug started to visit him again. And it was when my son was there for a visit that this person came and killed him, shot him with a gun. And my son, who was 11 at the time, was just devastated. I was devastated. He was my rock, even though I knew we couldn't live together. I knew he loved me. I knew he loved our son. And I knew he was there. And his death was a turning point in my life. So I will stop sharing that. I decided to go to law school after that. I probably would not have if it had not been for that. I needed something positive to take away the horrible thing that had happened to our family. And I was driven. I was driven to get through law school, to become a lawyer. And then I met my wonderful husband, who's probate judge at the time, and he got me into politics. I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been for him. I would still be working as a lawyer in the estate planning and retirement planning area of law. But when my husband approached me about becoming a district judge, he told me that I would have the opportunity to influence and to help people that suffer from addiction. And that turned out to be very compelling to me. I felt like it was a way to give back. I couldn't save Bob, but maybe I could save someone else.
Thank you, Judge Mack. Very, very powerful, very compelling. Have you said everything you have to say with your story about what took you to this, to where you are now with us?
I guess my I guess parting words would be, I mean, there's no one answer for everyone, you know. I mean, every addiction is different. Every path to recovery is different. You have to keep trying. I think Bob would have gotten clean. I do think, I hope that he would have. I mean, he was on the road to recovery. But the people that are involved in the drug trade, you know, are not the nicest people. You know, I just, it's a way to honor him. It's a way to acknowledge that, you know, he had wonderful qualities, many good qualities. He was a wonderful dad. He just couldn't beat it. And drugs are like that. I mean, you try the wrong thing and it can steal your brain. It can steal your life, and it affects other people's lives. And it's something that I'm still dealing with to this day.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share my story. I hope it helps somebody else. I'm not sure it does, but it's just humbling to see all of you and realize that you're going through the same things that I went through and still do go through. I suffer for everyone, for all of you. It's a personal suffering. But
thank you very much for telling your story. What a devastating story. And you know, that a lot of us completely relate to what you're talking about, because addiction is like that, right? I mean,
yes,
many of us have friends who've successfully recovered, but also many of us have loved ones who haven't. You know, my story is similar in that my loved one was also murdered, you know, in connection with his drug use. And I can completely relate to your feelings of, I want to help other people because I couldn't help him. I always said the same thing. And I think that, I think that there are many people who feel exactly like that. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we move on to Elise Dubois? And we can.
well, let me just, oh, go ahead, Mary. Oh, I just wanted to say my son is fine. He's now 44 and he has a very good job. He's married. We have a granddaughter who's 17. So he turned out well. I was very worried about that, but he's living a good life, and he doesn't appear to bear the scars of that early trauma. But I worry. I still worry. But so far, so good.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. So moving on to Elise Dubois. I already gave your introduction a little bit earlier, so you can just take it away from here.
All right, thanks. Well, thank you, Judge Mack. That was the first time I'd heard that story. So I totally appreciate you sharing with all of us. And I agree with you. I think that by not talking about drug addiction, alcoholism, mental health, the stigma just continues to get bigger and badder and harder to discuss. And, it's, so I'm in recovery. So I have just celebrated 8 years sober in November. Thank you. And, there's this big saying in the program that our secrets keep us sick. So it's important that, we talk about things and almost kind of normalize some of the struggles that so many people go through and feel so alone, myself being one of them. So I first started drinking and using drugs when I was 14. So I had now I can detect a little bit of some things going on in my family and, in my environment, but at the time it wasn't anything that was really obvious, so, I started really just using drugs and drinking to numb my feelings and numb my insecurities. And, like every 14-year-old or 15-year-old or high schooler or college, kid feels awkward and uncomfortable and worried and all of that normal stuff. I just didn't have a normal way to deal with it. So I found a really abnormal way when I was very young. And it was never really an issue. So it's interesting because I know there are people who are just clearly struggling, and they have consequences that are always following them, and they're getting in trouble, and they're it's really obvious that they have a problem. And then there are so many other people like your first husband that you mentioned that you would have just never known. And I'm really glad that you mentioned something that I talk about too with people, is that, a lot of alcoholics, a lot of drug addicts are very outgoing, very charismatic, very extroverted, and very smart, very intelligent, very hardworking. For me, I didn't miss work, so I got through high school, I went to college, things just kind of progressed, started experimenting with other drugs. I got a fake ID when I was like 16 years old, started drinking in the bars when I was 17. And so things, progressed, but I always had at least one job. Like I joke about like having multiple jobs. Like when I was in high school, I had like 2 jobs, so I could pay for alcohol, drugs, clothes, things like that. But I was a hard worker, and that continued through college. I had an internship, I worked in a bar, I worked in restaurants. And then even after college, there was a time when I had, my first real job, and I had 2 other like waitressing and bartending jobs alongside of that. So I do think that there is a tendency for a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts to push through discomfort, to push through and just kind of keep very focused on keeping it together. So, I didn't have a lot of outward signs of struggle. And I say that because I feel like there are a lot of people that are like that. And especially now, now I'm a therapist. I, have clients. I talk to people all the time. I get a lot of phone calls from friends and family, just with all of the struggle that's going on right now. And, I hear all the time, well, they're still working. They have never gotten a DUI. They, just there's not outward signs, but I always, and something I learned in recovery, that the word to follow that is yet. There aren't consequences yet, but there will be eventually. And a lot of the consequences for many people like myself, and part of my story, were just internal. I was just very depressed. I was very anxious. I somehow had the wherewithal or just the fortitude to just keep showing up. But I was showing up to work hungover. I was showing up to work high. I'm not sure, we talk a lot about a higher power in the program of recovery, and there was definitely a higher power at work, because I did not get a DUI yet. I mean, I can't even count the number of times that, I should have. I wasn't in a horrible, dangerous, well, I was in a lot of dangerous situations, but, I didn't have the consequences yet. And so I think about that, and, that is part of the reason that I was interested in becoming a part of FAN and becoming a therapist and, working with people who are struggling in all different kinds of ways, substance abuse included, because I feel like there was something that was looking out for me, because I didn't end up in jail, or I didn't end up, dead. I didn't end up, incapacitated in some way, and I didn't end up doing something really horrible, to someone else yet. So I think of that a lot when I, decide how I want to give back and how I want to try to support people. And I think that, so my recovery story was, I started to get sober when I was about 33 for the first time. And I was clean for 2 years, but I really did not do any type of program. I just used that sheer willpower and that fortitude to just not drink or use drugs. I was not happy. And it was really just only a matter of time. And then, something happened, and I didn't really have any community. I didn't, I wasn't really open. I didn't really talk about things. I didn't really, share with people that I was sober, that I was clean. And then I went back out. And then for 8 years, I was back out there just doing, picking up kind of right where I left off. Things got more intense. And then I did start to have some struggles with relationships, with work, with a little bit with my health. And then, it all kind of came crashing down. Like, a relationship ended. My mom was diagnosed with what ended up to be terminal ovarian cancer. I was living out of state, and I just thought, I have to do something. And I knew, because that seed had been planted, years ago, that there was a program that I could, show up. And I thought I would give it a try, because I really didn't have any other solutions. And I did it a little differently, a lot differently. I kind of listened to what people were saying. I was able to relate a lot more. And I thought about things from a larger perspective. It wasn't, I was able to be honest and kind of look at my life as a whole and see which direction I wanted to go. It was not easy. It is not easy. And so when you talk about people not being able to, quit using or quit drinking, it really, I think it is impossible to do alone, without support, without a community, without some type of program to help you. And I definitely believe that all of those things enhance our recovery and, ultimately our lives, to make them make more sense, have more meaning, and be able to find ways to give back and to think about things, with a different lens than a scared, small, isolated lens of addiction and alcoholism. So I went back to school, got my master's in counseling, and really, FAN really appealed to me, because I felt like it touched everyone in Michigan. I mean, there's so many different chapters, and there's so many different types of people that attend the meetings and that are, affiliated with FAN or that work with FAN. And I mean, my big goal, I guess, is to talk about struggles that people are going through, and to understand that all addiction and all alcoholism doesn't look the same, and that people that seem like they're doing okay may not be doing okay. and that it's not a kind of a one-stop shop either. There are different ways to get sober. There are different ways to find recovery. There are differences between sobriety and recovery. So I think that with other types of drugs, it does have to be a little bit more hard stop and abstinence based. And but it can be for different reasons. You know, with alcoholism, I mean, this last couple of years have really just kind of planted the seeds for addiction and alcoholism to develop. And I think that there are a lot more people, just to bring awareness to this, out there that maybe would never have become addicts or alcoholics had they not been put in this situation of COVID and you know, isolation and quarantine for this long. And so it has to be looked at from that lens. And you know, just part of what I feel like my job is and my intention is to have all the conversations with people. It doesn't have to be one way or the other, but the conversations and the awareness have to be there. And so that was really my goal of being on the board. I love being on the board. I'm glad to be on the advisory board. I'm always, you know, I mean, my practice is really full, as most therapists are, but I'm always happy to, I'm always open to helping out somebody who's struggling with substance use, even if it's to find them another, you know, resource, or I just have sort of like that soft spot, you know, for that struggle. So I never really thought that this is where I would be, you know, and I will say that it's a continuous, you know, process, because all those years, and this is something to remember too, I think for people that have loved ones that are in addiction and alcoholism and recovery, you know, all the years that I was using, I was not learning how to cope, you know, so I didn't have the same emotional intelligence. I mean, it comes a lot quicker, you know, now, but I was 14 years old emotionally until I was about 38. And so it can be a struggle sometimes with people. And I see that a lot with people that I work with and people that I know, just that emotional intelligence isn't developed. It does not match your chronological age, for sure. And just to have, you know, have patience, like for people who are on this call, who have loved ones, you know, that are struggling, it's not that obvious. Just because someone's 30, 40, 50, 60, they don't just know, you know, what to do all the time. And I try to remember that about myself and, you know, other people that I work with too. So thanks for letting me share. I think I was about 15 or so minutes, maybe a few less, but yeah, thanks. I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you so much, Elise. And we are grateful that you're on our board. We are grateful that you're here too. And we just love having you on our board and love having you be involved with us. So thank you for being a part of our group, our team here. Does anybody have any questions for or comments for Elise before we move on to Tanya? Okay, then.
I would
there we
actually
go.
just like to say one thing, Elise. I'm so grateful for you and for Judge Mack that you took this time of your life and made it for good. I mean, look at the great things that you both are doing. And Lord knows we don't have enough counselors, great counselors in this field. So thank you so much for both of you being so vulnerable and sharing, and for giving back the way that you do. Greatly appreciated. We're very fortunate, as Lauren said, to have you on our team.
Thanks.
Okay, Tanya.
Hi, I guess I'll start off by saying I apologize if I have to cough because I'm just getting over COVID. I am involved in FAN because my, I guess, journey started when my daughter got involved with drugs back in 2008. I thought it was just with pot. I was very unaware of drugs at that time. she had gotten aggressive with her little sister, and she was 18 at the time. And it was her senior year of high school. And so after she had hit her sister, I told her she had to move out because she was 18. So she moved out, and I found out that it was not just pot. She had started with Adderall. I guess she was dealing with depression over the breakup of her boyfriend, and a friend of hers had, I didn't find this out until the end, right before I lost her. But she told me that way back in the beginning, her friend knew that she was depressed and said, "Oh, just take some Adderall. It'll make you feel better." And she said she kept telling her, no, I'm not going to do that. And she said that the Adderall was everywhere throughout her school. And so finally, after her friend kept encouraging her to take it, she took it, and she said it made her feel better. So she took one, and then that led to another one, and then eventually one wasn't enough, and a few, and then led to a couple more, and then those led to needing other drugs because it wasn't, the Adderall wasn't enough. Then it was Adderall and Xanax. Then it was who knows what else, multiple pills. Then she ended up moving in at some point with a guy who, his parents, not only were they drug dealers, but when this young man was a child, they had put him on the street to deal for them because they felt that he wouldn't get caught as a child. So this kid told me that his parents had had him hustling, as he put it, so that they wouldn't get caught. So at 8 years old, he was hustling drugs for them. So, I mean, I guess I couldn't be mad at him in a sense because it was what he knew. I had such compassion for this young man because it's all he knew. So, she got a taste of her first overdose, not by herself, but waking up to him overdosing next to her. And just for her telling me these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, this stuff that she's experiencing. And then she's telling me. I quickly got a crash course in drugs from her knowledge of things I never wanted to know. And sorry. And she just started, using more, probably because, his access to it all. And she, started, she ended up going to somewhere where a friend of hers took her, said he would take her to a hotel, and because she didn't have a place to stay. And at that point, it had just been pills. And he wanted to rob her. And he shot her up with heroin for the first time. So it wasn't even, she didn't even start heroin on her own. That was something that this guy did to her, and left her for dead. And she luckily didn't die. And I got a knock at the door from a police officer, and I come to the door and I don't see her. And I'm thinking he's coming to tell me she's gone, but she was in the car. And these are all stories that I couldn't share with people because very few people in my family knew she was addicted. The few people that did know had judged her and excommunicated her. So I felt it wasn't my story to tell because she was already dealing with enough judgment. And so I had to keep it all in and pretty much just battle it with just her. And I tried to get her to go to rehab and she wouldn't. So after that first taste of heroin that guy did to her, heroin was it then. So she started in with heroin. And then not long after that, she started stealing, getting in trouble with the law. She actually went before Judge Mack. And at one point, I begged Judge Mack to put her in jail, and she did for me. And I was very grateful because at least then I knew where she was. So I, and then in probably 3 years before she passed, she was in jail on a probation violation. And this young man who she had gotten engaged to at some point passed away from an overdose while she was in jail. And I had to tell her behind glass. And that was, I thought that was going to be the hardest day of my life. And at that time it was, because watching her fall apart behind glass was brutal. But luckily they let her get out early to attend his funeral. And she spiraled for a while. But she managed to, live 3 years past his passing, which I thought, okay, we've made it 3 years past his death. We're on, we've turned the corner. She ended up detoxing on accident. She flew somewhere with a friend, and on her way back, she didn't have any drugs. And so she detoxed. It was so bad that she ended up having a seizure and coded. And so they put her in the hospital. And so that when I got to the hospital, she told me that was the first time in 8 years she had been clean. And so we had some of the most amazing conversations, because that was, I think, 4 or 5 months before she passed. And that's when she told me how it all started, the friends who did what and who were not good influences along the way. And so I know there's some friends that don't know that I know what I know. But it was a really a good few months there that, I'm grateful that I didn't have to deal with, she never stole from me. She never, stole my car, never stole money from me, never did any of those things. So I'm very grateful for that. But during that time when she, after she detoxed, they got her on Vivitrol, which is a shot that you take, and it wasn't working, and she didn't tell anybody. And So one time, even after she got the Vivitrol shot, she ended up going ahead and overdosing. And that was it. So after she was gone, knowing that very few people knew, after she was gone, it was like, I don't want to talk to people about it now, because it was like, I don't want to damage her, like their opinion of her. So I sat in my grief for probably a year before I found Fan. And it was at that point that I decided, I don't want more people to go through this. I want to do something to help. And that's when I found Fan, and I got involved, and I got on the grief board, or grief started. And well, first I was just attending, and then I started running it. And that's when I became an angel for the Hope Not Handcuffs. And then that's when, in the local church, I found the jail and prison ministry. And then I joined the board, because I don't want any more, not one more.
Wow, Tanya, such a an amazing, tragic, and devastating story. And I'm so sorry to hear it. I think it's the first time I've heard it for the first time, and maybe many of our other board members as well. And I know how difficult it is and was for you to share it, but thank you for sharing this story. It's very powerful. Did she was on Vivitrol at the time that she did the shot that where she overdosed?
Yeah.
You know, I've heard that that's a risk with Vivitrol, right? Because
Yeah.
people try to overcome the block.
Yep.
And yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm very, very, very sorry for your loss, and very grateful that you found us and that you're with us, and inspired by all of the things that you do and are doing to turn the tragedy into something that helps other people. So thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you so much for sharing. Samantha, our last speaker for today.
Hi, everyone. My name's Samantha. My story is a little bit different, but I would also like to start with thanking, I serve on the board with all three of you, and I don't know that I've ever heard your complete stories. And it's a testimony to the fact of like a lie that I told myself for many years, which was, I'm not hurting anybody else, right? That's not true. And the longer I stay sober and the longer I hear from the family members, especially being associated with FAN, the more I know that this work is really important to open up opportunities like this where people can be sincere and tell their stories and tell the truth, and hopefully break the stigma related to addiction. So my addiction is alcoholism. Last June, I celebrated 16 years sober. So thank you. I don't take a whole lot of credit for that, though. And there's a reason for that. The progression of my ego, is not a healthy thing for me. So I acknowledge, just how many things came together to help me stay sober every day. But I love what everyone on the panel said. It's a generational, for some of us, a generational disease. So not only have I been impacted by alcoholism, but I'm I'm third generation, right? So I watched my mother pretty much drink herself to death, and she watched her mother do the same thing. Neither my mother or my grandmother were ever able to attain any kind of sobriety. My mother was sober maybe a year or two for her entire life, and that was through a program. I picked up my first drink when I was 12, and the first time I drank to a blackout. I didn't know what a blackout was. I didn't know that experience was that. But that is just part of my story in terms of alcoholism is a progressive disease. But for those of us that have a genetic predisposition and then who are raised in certain environments, we are, I guess some would say we're double winners, right? So I come from a very gregarious group of family members that had their own struggles and their own stories. But the one thing that I picked up on as a child growing up in the environment was that it was very important to remain, how did Elise put it, functioning. Like you had to take care of business, right? You had to make sure that you would take care of your responsibilities. So I cultivated for a lot of years in the progression of my alcoholism, the facade that I could take care of business. It also makes for a pretty lonely life because you don't tell anybody else what's actually going on. And you have to maintain that because you don't want anyone else to know what's going on. You certainly don't want them to know that you cannot figure out how to stop doing this thing that you know is very destructive. So as part of my story, that's what happened. I picked up at 12. I didn't get sober till I was 36. I didn't have a whole lot of consequences. I got one ticket for OUIL in the early 90s. And back then, they really didn't do any interventions that made a difference, at least for me. They made me take a highway safety course, which I did. They made me go to probation for 6 months, which I did. They charged me some money, which I paid, and then I went right back on with my life. So that interaction didn't really help me quit. It definitely didn't address my relationship with alcohol, right? And I don't even know that even if it had, would I have listened then? I don't know that, but the years went by and it got progressively worse. And so much like Elise, my consequences were internal. So I dealt with a lot of depression. I dealt with a lot of alienation. I dealt with I had put myself in situations that were very high risk. And as a result, I dealt with a lot of assault, physical assault, and emotional abuse and things like that. And I didn't deal with them all because I did not have the coping for that. I had learned from my family that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you keep moving. And so drinking became my ability to try and forget those things that I could not handle and continue to move on and do the things that I knew I was supposed to be doing. And when I was about 36, I came out of a blackout and I was in my home and I just had a moment of clarity. And for me, I call it like a moment of divine inspiration because I didn't trust people in the medical field. So I didn't tell them the truth, about my drinking. I didn't really trust any professionals. I didn't want them to write anything down. So I would never go and say, this is what I'm dealing with. But I'd been dealing with suicidal thoughts for probably a decade, and I just hadn't acted on them. And that morning, I woke up and I felt that I was going to act on them. And it scared me because my kids were in the house with me. And I remember the one thought I had was, well, I can't do this because I don't know where to do it. so the kids don't find me. And when I had that thought, it was just a moment of clarity. I knew I was in trouble. So I called the one person that I still trusted, which was my dad. And he lived down in Florida at the time. And he told me to go to the phone book and look up AA, which was a really surprising thing for him to say, because my dad didn't know anything about AA. But I didn't know anything about them either. So I went and I called a crisis hotline, and they told me about a meeting, and I went. And I didn't know that you're not supposed to detox in your house. I would not encourage that for anyone. It was a very uncomfortable situation. And I learned after that, you know, you can have a lot of medical problems doing that. I didn't know that. Thank God I didn't. I'm still here. But I did get introduced to a recovery community. And at that point, I had been through so many years of not being authentic, that being authentic felt very scary. But they were all like, you can do this, here, take this booklet, do this next step, do this next thing. And so I had worked myself into such an inability to function in my life that I was finally willing to say, okay, I'm going to listen to somebody else because my ideas are not working. And one day at a time, you know, I don't have a relapse story. In terms of drinking again, I don't, but I could say that, you know, we have other kinds of relapses in recovery. You know, we have a potential and a capacity to look at things that are out of balance. The healthier we get, the more we can recognize those things ahead of time and start dealing with those. So, you know, I don't speak for any recovery community. I just say that that was my route to recovery. I have learned in that community how to be authentically who I am. I have learned that I don't have to live a double life anymore. I've learned that I can help other people just by virtue of telling my story. I've had the honor of being able to work with many women, other women that had a similar story to mine, who were very isolated and alone and broken and scared. And that's quite an honor, actually, when someone trusts you to that extent and will let you help them in that way. So I'm very grateful for all of the people in recovery that gave me the environment in which to heal and to grow, and they continue to do that. COVID has done such a number on our community because we can't meet the way we normally do. But still there are people willing, really, to help through phone calls and Zoom and everything else, right? There's always a hand that reaches out. That community is vastly important. I was able to go back to school. I went back to school and got 3 degrees. And now I'm a therapist who works with people. And I never pursued, per se, I want to work with folks that have addiction issues. But there's not a population that exists that there aren't folks that have addiction issues. So, you know, I think that sometimes we get very interested in like, this is going to be my population of people I'm going to work with. And through recovery and like, so a big part of my story too is my spirituality. And every day just saying, I'm going to put this day in my Creator's hands, and whatever happens with this day, that's what I'm going to do. If you put it in front of me, then I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And if it weren't for that, I do not believe that I would be here with you today. And I do not believe that I would even be alive, quite frankly. Dara is on the board at FAN, and she approached me a couple years ago, and we're talking on the phone, and she was like, hey, do you think that you might want to come and check out this board? And I'm like, well, what do they do? You know? And she explained it to me. And I said, yeah, I would be interested in that, because a very large part of recovery for me today is, you know, I spent so many years avoiding and staying away from community and hiding and being very isolated. And what recovery has taught me is that I need to be, you know, in community. And the ability to reach out to other people and help in any way that I can ensures that I stay sober one more day. You know, it's kind of like a promise, you know, that if I put my life in my higher power's hands and I say, I'm going to pursue what you put in front of me, that has just worked for me one day at a time all of these years. And I have had the honor of working with other people that have found a way to get sober and be free. And it's an amazing thing to experience, because it's so hard to explain to people that don't have addiction, the loneliness and the despair of wanting so desperately to get sober and get free, but you can't. You don't know how, right? So the minute I put alcohol in my system, I lose my power of choice in that. And so a lot of people still believe like, oh, you just say no. Well, if I could just say no, I would have never, you know, become an alcoholic, right? My relationship with alcohol is different than that, you know? So I'm very grateful that I didn't hurt somebody, because I could have, I'm sure. I'm very grateful that I get to sit on the fan board, that I get to learn more, that I get to serve more in a different capacity. In the beginning, I served a lot in my recovery community because that's a community I felt safe in, you know, and then I got my degrees and I was able to get into a different job, right? And I don't even call it a job, I call it a career, right? Calling. And I started serving in that capacity. And now I serve in this capacity. And, you know, when opportunities present themselves, the best thing I can do for all those years where I didn't contribute, and as a testimony to all the people that helped me get sober, the best thing I can do for them is to look out my community and say, how can I help and what can I do? You know, I think that that's just a beautiful gift of recovery, because I might be nervous, you know, I might be a little bit scared, but I'm not scared to the point that I was in my addiction, where I couldn't engage with other people in an authentic way. I could engage with you in a very inauthentic way. You could see a version of myself that I thought you wanted to see, but I very rarely ever had real interaction with people that was honest and upfront. And today I get to do that, right? So with all my flaws and with all my mistakes, right? This is it, you know, I don't have to hide anymore. And so for that, I'm very grateful. And I'm just, I love everything that FAN does. I think the forums really help people that are still struggling with addiction and their family members to break the stigma. I think we still have, even in 2022, I think we have so much work to be done about reducing the stigma, because really, honestly, for years in my head, my picture of what a drunk was like, you know, you lived under a bridge, you had a rope belt, and you didn't have a job, and you didn't have teeth. And, you know, in my mind, that's what an alcoholic was. And that's so, I mean, that could be one example, I guess, but there are so many people that have addiction that I believe may not have the opportunity to be honest about it. So the more spaces we create for people to be able to have the courage to do that, I think the better off our society will be. And so I love FAN for what they do for the family members. You know, I can't give back to the family members that I hurt in my use earlier on, but I can help other family members, you know. So thanks for letting me share.
Wow, Samantha, that was great. Thank you so much. You are a very powerful speaker. You know, you're like a rock star on our board. So we're super grateful to have you.
Absolutely. And thank you for
yeah.
saying yes, Samantha.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we are very grateful you said yes.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course.
I have
Well,
a
so
question. Can I
yes.
ask a question?
Yeah, I was just going to
Um,
invite questions, so go.
Oh, Samantha, one thing I've heard is that NA isn't as effective as AA. Like NA for people that are suffering from like an opioid addiction or cocaine or things like that, that NA isn't the same as AA. And I just wondered if you had any knowledge or opinion on that.
Well, so I can share that AA is obviously Alcoholics Anonymous. NA is Narcotics Anonymous. I know people that have gotten sober in Narcotics Anonymous for years, long-term recovery. So both those entities were closed communities. So any time that you hear any kind of like data or numbers on our efficacy rates, they don't come from us because we're a closed community, right? Because everybody has anonymity. So our head office wouldn't give that kind of data out, and all of the groups kind of run themselves. But in terms of how do those two entities work together, sometimes you have people come into Alcoholics Anonymous that have been at Narcotics Anonymous and say, I'm struggling to find people with long-term sobriety. Can you help us? With those two entities will work together. But I do have to say that I've known people, you know, a lot of times the resistance to a recovery community is because when you go into those communities, we don't shine apples, we tell the truth. So if somebody comes in with a lot of reasons of why they can't, we'll say, okay, so our only advice to you is when you come in, you've got to listen to people that have and follow in their footsteps, right? And so sometimes people get upset and say, well, they didn't help me. At a certain point, you kind of got to take responsibility, you know, to at least take suggestion, right? So in AA and NA, those entities will help each other, right? So there's also, and because it's FAN, I think it's important to say, there's also Nar-Anon, right? Which is much like Al-Anon, which is Narcotics Anonymous group for family members. So there are all kinds of supports in those recovery communities, and both of them have open meetings. So if anybody was struggling to say like, okay, so could I get help or support from them? You can always go to their meeting sites. And if it says O for open meeting, that means family members and loved ones can go to those meetings and learn more about those entities.
Thank you, Samantha. Bob Davis, I looked like your hand was up and then it was down and it was up, then it was down. Did you have a question or comment you wanted to make? I guess not. All right. Does anybody else?
Hey, sorry,
there we go.
Lauren.
Hey, Bob.
I'm here. I was trying to type in a chat.
Oh, okay.
And I was just going to say thanks to all the presenters on their tremendous testimonies and stories. They were very powerful, all of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think they were too. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for our presenters, or just something that you maybe want to share before we close today?
I'm David, and I'm kind of new to the group, but I just wanted to echo what Samantha said, because I know at the PC Alano Club, they have open meetings where you can sit in on an AA meeting and not be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous and learn about the group. I'm personally in early recovery, and I didn't really know what this was about. And my girlfriend attends some of those open meetings, and she herself had said she has a whole different idea about the community, having attended open meetings and listening to me and other people share during those meetings. So what Samantha said is absolutely right.
Thank you so much for sharing that, David. And thank you for joining us tonight. We're really glad that you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad I was. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions from anyone? Okay, then I'm going to turn it back over to Judge Mack to take us home.
Okay, well, that does conclude our meeting today. We thank you all for coming. We encourage you to visit our website, and please think about coming to our next forum on enabling. Every time I've heard Jackie Sanders speak about anything, she's just absolutely fantastic. And she knows this stuff so well. And I know it's a topic that is near and dear to the recovery community and their families. It's such an essential aspect of recovery. So please plan to be there for our next forum, and stay tuned. We'll keep you all informed of our activities as the year goes forward. And Happy New Year, everybody. And be well, be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks
Bye,
to all of our
everybody.
speakers.
Yep.